Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation addressing capacity and scalability for acquisition success, the first in a three-part series focused on acquisition success. I'm Jessica Flynn. Some of you may recognize me from my time at the Financial Planning Association. I've recently joined the FPTransitions team because their mission to drive sustainability of advisory and planning firms is, in my opinion, unmatched in this industry. Since 1999, FPTransitions has teamed with over 4,000 businesses. Their primary focuses today are on both organic growth and M&A strategies that transform practices into thriving businesses. They pave leadership and ownership paths for the next generation of advisors, and they ensure the sustainability of this profession. FPTransitions is also well known as the leading M&A firm for financial advisors because that's where we began. And today, FPTransitions continues to do the highest number of M&A in this profession. Before we get started, please note that your presenters are available for Q&A in the chat feature. Feel free to ask any questions throughout today's presentation. And if you have any technical issues, please message us in the chat. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. James Fisher. James leads FP's M&A department. James and his team completed 83 M&A deals last year and are on track to complete over 100 in 2021. During his tenure at FP, James has been integral in transforming FP into a full-service M&A firm. Marcus Hagood. Marcus has over 7 years with FP, and before that, he was with TD Ameritrade. Marcus built a number of services and systems that support financial advisors and planners throughout their ownership journey, and he has shared his expertise at many industry events over the years. Scott Leek. One of FP's newest experts, Scott Leek joined FP after his 20 years with TD, where he dedicated his time and energy to serving the RIA market. He even achieved a CFP designation in 2010 to better understand the unique challenges that financial planners face today. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And now I'll turn it over to James.
Hey, thank you. And I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. As Jess just talked about, today's webinar is focused on addressing capacity and scalability. This is a webinar that is the first of a three-part webinar series titled Acquisition Success. This webinar series will focus on buyers in the current M&A landscape and is intended to provide firms that are or really would like to participate in the M&A marketplace as buyers with our insight on a variety of topics, including the traits and attributes of effective buyers and how to prepare for and ultimately deploy a successful M&A strategy. The presenters today are myself, Marcus, and Scott, and I look forward to them sharing some information with you. And now I'm going to hand the reins over to Marcus to get us kicked off today.
Thank you, Jess and James, for the fabulous introduction, and thank you all for attending today's presentation on acquisition scale and capacity. As I was on my way into the office today, beautiful Northwest fall day, crisp, cool, hint of forest fire in the air. I always get excited at this time of the year because as a Nebraskan and now Oregonian, I know that college football is just around the corner. It's just about to kick off. So super excited about that. And growing up in Nebraska, knowing that you have two Nebraskans on the presentation today with Scott Leek and myself, I obviously look back with admiration on Tom Osborne's success and what he was able to accomplish both on and off the field. When I was in high school, I had the rare opportunity to see him speak actually at my school. It was a huge deal. School band was there playing the fight song. There was lots of fanfare, and he had his usual impactful speech done in his mild-mannered, aw shucks sort of way. But he opened that speech with a quote that was attributed to Darrell Royal, the famous Texas coach that Osborne had a lot of admiration for. And the quote was, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." And that luck, or perception of it, is what we're here to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can better prepare yourself for acquisition by focusing on capacity and scale. We'll focus on what capacity and scale means, why they're important to you and your business, how you can develop and measure them in your own business, and how working with FPTransitions with a focus on scale and capacity will enhance your luck in acquisition. So what does capacity and scale mean for a financial service firm in regard to acquisition? Well, let's start by defining them both. Capacity references the maximum output or capability that your practice is able to attain. In light of acquisition, this is referencing having the right number of people, the right processes, technology, services, and products in place to acquire hundreds, perhaps thousands of new clients all in one shot. In short, do you have the manpower in place to handle the workflow? Scale, on the other hand, is a reference to increasing productivity as your organization grows. Or said another way, have you maximized the people, the process, the technology, the services, and the products in such a way that allows you to be more efficient and potentially have less capacity requirements?
If you're wondering, how do you measure the capacity and scalability of your business? There are a few considerations we'll cover today, but know that the most thorough way would be to leverage an organization like FPTransitions to do a formal evaluation and then benchmark your business against your peer group and an ideal peer group. First, an advisory firm's size in and of itself is not as important as the scale and capacity. So, as Socrates once said, know thyself. Most advisors are solo owners, and they fall into the category of owning a job or a book. About 25% of advisors are what is known as practices. There's a formal entity in place, usually one owner, some staff, earnings are paid out in compensation, but not in profits. The remaining 5% are businesses or firms. These enterprises are organizations with org structure, entity structure, compensation structure in place that will outlast the founder. These are enduring, transferable businesses that may already be multi-generational. So which you are may influence your ideal acquisition target. You should be at least 1.5 to 2 times larger than the target firm you're hoping to acquire. With that in mind, which of these might be best you'd be best positioned to acquire? It's pretty rare for you to acquire a firm larger, more sophisticated than yourself. So consider that each of these categories require different acquisition strategies, and you may not yet have the capacity and scale to acquire the latter two, but reasonably could the first two, for example. So don't think that though acquiring a business or a firm is something that only national buyers have the capacity and scale to do. Marcus, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So there's this concept or talk from many industry pundits out there that you have to be in the top 100 firms, or there's only 100 real buyers out there in the marketplace. We here at FPTransitions have a slightly different perception on that, and actually think that's a misrepresentation of our industry and our marketplace. Sellers desire to have similar businesses run in a similar fashion to how they're running it today, or better. And because they have a need or a want to have their clients supported in the way that they're being supported today, they're going to look for firms that look very similar to them. So oftentimes you're seeing local buyers have a lot of success, even if they're smaller, finding other local opportunities, and even maybe branching off into regional opportunities as they begin to grow. You're also seeing regional buyers stretch and be able to go down to buy local opportunities, smaller firms, and also flex up even to start putting out and creating a national footprint for themselves. And of course, national buyers obviously are covering the full breadth of that. But as you can see by these numbers, these are the percentages of acquisitions done by regional, national, and local buyers based on our last year's acquisitions. You can see that there's still the majority that are being done by local and regional buyers. So this perception that there are only 100 real buyers out there, or that there's only a market where roll-up firms are considered, is not true in what we're seeing. So let's talk now about what are the components of scalability in a firm, or of scale in a firm. What makes a firm scalable? You know, those 3 traits predominantly start with entity structure. And that is speaking to what type of entity you've chosen. How does that create or allow you to grow faster and more efficiently? It also talks about or is reliant upon your organizational structure. How have you structured your team to be more efficient and effective in an acquisition? And it most importantly references compensation structures, because those structures are what allow you to leverage the acquisition to actually gain your value that you want out of it. The worst case scenario is you end up in a situation where you're using eat what you kill compensation and may be paying for another advisor's future windfall because you're using the wrong compensation tool. Starting with entity structures, what type of entity you should use will help you create scale and by being flexible enough to leverage growth and investment. Oftentimes, these are S corporations, LLCs, but it should promote sustainability by having a structure that can survive the test of time, avoiding any potential continuity, death or disability scenario, by having a multiple owners that can protect the business if something were to happen. It also should allow for multiple generations to carry the business through the life cycle of your clients and their financial advice needs, all the way till those clients are no longer in need of your services.
You know, and Marcus, I think this is really often taken for granted and unfortunately overlooked very easily. So a question I would have advisors consider here is, do I have an entity that can support leveraging its own equity in order to acquire other businesses? You know, many sellers are not just looking to cash out and walk away. You need to know if you're willing and able to offer equity in your business in order to attract some of those sellers. The right entity structure gives you that ability to flex. So, Marcus, what about organizational structure though?
Organizational structure is focusing on the people. Do you have the right people in the right roles? Do you have enough of them to handle the additional workload of another 100+ clients in one fell swoop? Have you aligned your structure to create diversity of culture? And can your organization communicate that culture to a prospective target so they know that there's good fit? Are there clear organizational charts, roles and responsibilities? Have you communicated these with the staff? Most importantly, have you communicated to your staff and your team and your structure that acquisition is good for the firm and for them as members of the team? You have to have the specialized talent needed for acquisition. If you don't have it internally, you could also leverage outside experts. But to develop your strategy, understand the markets, understand deal terms, have legal documents to close the deal, have the support through negotiations. These are all the things that your organizational structure either has to support or you have to look outside for support from an outside firm like FPTransitions.
I think those are all really great questions to consider. And one of the top reasons a seller is considering selling in the first place is to answer a question that's very commonly asked by a lot of their clients, which is, what happens to me if something happens to you? So if you don't already have this question thoroughly answered within your own organizational structure, sellers may take a pass knowing they're just going to be kicking the can down the road. Your organizational structure needs to alleviate that concern for potential sellers and for their client base. Clients need to be acquired and feel like this is more than a lateral move for them. It needs to feel like an upgrade. And those legal documents Marcus referenced are some of the types of things we're helping advisors with every day here, with things like written continuity plans, succession plans, and the like.
Finally, one of the most overlooked, but obviously most important, as I said earlier, in component in building scale and capacity is your compensation structure. How you pay your staff, and more importantly, how you compensate licensed professionals in your organization will make or break your acquisition. You need to ensure that your compensation structure supports growing margin, engenders a diverse multi-generational team, aligns to your culture, and helps to create it. And most importantly, does not create a situation where your acquisition ends up being a windfall for an advisor on your team because you're using something like eat what you kill compensation, revenue sharing arrangements, etc.
You know, I think one of the other questions you need to ask as you prepare for an acquisition is, do you want to acquire talent? Do you want to acquire clients, or are you looking to acquire both? If you want employees to come with in a transaction, be thinking about what are the positions you currently need. Do you need more advisors? Do you need support staff? Do you need both of those? Do you need to work on diversity and inclusion within your practice? Or maybe you've got a lot of younger talent already there and you need a seasoned advisor to come in and become a mentor for a few years. Your compensation structure should be able to answer all of those various outcomes. If you intend to recruit, retain, and attract top talent, your compensation structure needs to be well thought out. And like Marcus said, ideally not in an eat what you kill world, but one built for an enduring transferable business. Lastly, there are a lot of creative solutions that we've helped advisors with in terms of designing and implementing comp structures using various forms of real equity, synthetic equity, or a combination of both. And these are the kinds of issues we help acquirers address, design, and implement. And it just helps for you to know what some of those options are for you.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about developing capacity and scale for acquisition. We'll start with just M&A capacity. Do you have a team in place? What is the, who are the people for the process? M&A capacity is an acute focus on the people needed to execute the acquisition. This slide illustrates the process that every firm will go through to do an acquisition. What do you need to do to develop it as a team, those skill sets? Or are there skill sets that are needed here in these steps that you don't have the skills available on your team to accomplish? Is this a situation where the founder of the firm will be the deal maker? Does that person actually have the time for that? Do you need to teach your team or your lead advisors to take over your advisory practice work so you can focus on doing the M&A process? Again, building that M&A capacity and capability, you need to be intentional about how you develop it. It needs to align and support your acquisition efforts, or you could look for somebody else to assist you in doing that so that you don't have to spend the entire time or develop that internally.
And Marcus, I think one of the key things you touched on there is thinking not just about the capacity of the firm, but the capacity of the owners of the business. They're the ones that are going to be, engaging in the actual work here when an acquisition begins. So you need to think about, can you support all these functions of running your business, growing your business, and supporting your current client base while doing an acquisition? Can you do this and can you do it well? And, Marcus, I think this next thing we're going to talk about here, covering some real specific metrics, are going to be really helpful in measuring that merger and acquisition capability, capacity.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. The KPIs, key performance indicators in your business, we're highlighting here 3 that we feel are very important to acquisition scale and capacity. And this is a real client. This is a client that is extremely interested in doing acquisitions, but perhaps based on the information that we've discussed with them, might not quite be ready for it. And so in our work, in our benchmarking efforts, you can see here we've highlighted these 3 benchmarking indexes: household per professional, profit per professional, and total expense percentage, with the idea that in our conversations with this client, looking at households per professional as an example, I can tell you in the industry as a whole, most firms are going to gear around somewhere between 70 and 100 clients per advisor. Depending on the size of the client, that might skew to the lower end. If there are smaller clients, it might skew to the higher end. That said, you can see here the subject practice at 113 clients or households per advisor. They're really kind of maxed out from a perspective of just pure capability or capacity. The peer group and the target group possibly, provided their clients aren't over $1 million on average, might have some capacity left. Again, clearly demonstrates in this case that there is a capacity concern here with the business. The next one, profit per professional, we're looking at how effectively are your professionals actually driving profitability down to the bottom line. So this is an efficiency of scale perspective. And you can see the subject practice there is actually fairly reasonably aligned with their peer and target group, suggesting that they're doing a good job of scaling their capabilities, but they're just maxing them out. The final KPI there, total expense percentage, looks at it from the perspective of, okay, are there operational costs or compensation costs that are impacting the overall business? And as you can see with this total expense percentage at 61%, far outpacing the peer and target group, the underlying story is the advisors and their compensation methodology is a revenue sharing arrangement. As I spoke with the client and sort of summing all of these points together, high levels of accounts or households per advisor, decent profitability per advisor, but high expenses, you're looking at a situation where they have met their capacity. They really do need to add additional advisors, and they're struggling to do that while maintaining profitability because they're using a revenue sharing arrangement and their expenses are getting ahead of them. These are the kind of benchmarking exercises and conversations that we have with our clients to help them refine not only their strategy, but figure out where they're at, what they really should be focusing on in acquisitions, and help them get better at making decisions around improving their business and their capabilities in acquisition.
Marcus, this is one of my favorite aspects of what I do in my role here, is helping advisors understand the details of their annual evaluations that they do with us and the benchmarking data that we provide. And I think looking at these KPIs, it's so vital to view these as a snapshot, but also to track them as changes year over year as a business grows and evolves. And there's dozens of KPIs that we measure and review with the firms that work with us. But I think there's a couple more we might want to highlight here and round out a nice even top 10 list. So I'm not going to cover all of these in detail, but just know that these are some of the other top metrics we recommend reviewing annually. And again, comparing the year over year changes, benchmarking against a peer group. And something else that's important too is not just looking at these individually in a vacuum, but how do some of these KPIs relate to each other and work together to paint a broader picture? Now, a lot of these are factors you want to know well when it comes to your own business, and they're going to be key factors that you're going to use to evaluate a potential acquisition target as well. You should be prepared for potential sellers to be asking you for these details about your business as well. And they want to know that they're selling to a strong, well-run organization. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about each of these specific metrics, but if there's any questions, we can address those at the end.
Thank you, Scott. Those are great additional key performance metrics to think about. The next step is really, how do you put it all together? And how potentially can FPTransitions help you with that?
So being a successful buyer starts with being a successful growing business, one that's endurable and transferable. And you need to have already solved for continuity and succession planning in your own business before you can become someone else's exit strategy. And next, this bears repeating, one of the most important aspects of your M&A strategy is to know yourself and be intentional. Why do you want to do it at all? What am I buying? Why am I buying it? Think beyond adding AUM and revenue to your business. Consider, how might I gain value and strength by acquiring a targeted business? Know who's a bad fit. What deals are you willing to walk away from if the opportunity isn't right? A successful buyer thoroughly knows herself and her business. And when considering who is a good fit for you to acquire, consider thinking back on our discussion earlier on geography. Do you want to be a very large firm in your area, or do you want to maybe be more diverse across the region? And what about your staff and the needs you have in potentially adding from the available talent at another firm. Factors like the client base. Do you have a client niche? And if so, does that rule out firms without one, or maybe with a vastly different niche? What do you have to offer first to the clients of the firm you're buying and then to the business itself? How you are going to attract and keep their interest in you as the best person to care for their clients is vital to consider. More than anything, the seller is going to want cultural alignment, and you should want that fit as well. Now, for a pitch to potential sellers, it's a bit like developing your eHarmony profile. Be honest about yourself to them and to yourself. Sellers will quickly be able to differentiate between a self-aware, prepared buyer and a I'll figure it out as I go buyer. So treat each deal separately and uniquely. Being prepared isn't necessarily the same thing as having a template and sticking to it in every situation. Finally, to demonstrate your scale and capacity to a seller, have a pitch deck or a firm brochure. Have a shareable organization chart. Have defined roles and responsibilities that you can share with them. These are things that are going to come up during due diligence. Know things like your client satisfaction and be able to talk about that, showing you can retain their clients. And then be able to write a thorough and yet still succinct online inquiry. One of the things we do for our equity management solution clients here is to help them craft their message to catch the seller's eye. I'll digress here though and let Marcus close out talking a little bit more in detail about how we can help position you to be strong, qualified buyers in today's marketplace.
Thank you, Scott. Look, there's a lot to learn and know and understand about doing acquisitions and doing them well. Scale and capacity is just one small piece of that. What we've talked about today is how we work with advisors to look at their businesses in detail, figure out their strategy, benchmark themselves, how we work with them in coaching to get better at negotiation and deal structuring. The key here is that there aren't many firms out there that over the last 3 years have helped advisors actually close 250 transactions. More importantly, with a rate of closure on all the deals that are presented to us of 80%. That's the value that FPTransitions brings to the table and how we help our members actually be more successful with acquisition. We do it through valuation, we do it through consulting, we do it through support with non-disclosure agreements, LOIs, legal documentation. The key is that FPTransitions has the ability to support you and your efforts 360 degrees with our team of professionals to bring the type of success that you want. 250 transactions, 80% deals closed. That is how we help advisors with acquisition.